Hello, this is Scott Jentz. Welcome to Sandbox Stories. Hello, welcome to this Sandbox Story, which is an interview with Dr. Steve Lee. Dr. Lee is a serial entrepreneur in the eye care space, has done a lot of innovating, and has also taken some scrutiny for some of the things he's done. We're going to find out if that's really justified in today's interview with a guy that has really done a lot in the profession. Dr. Lee, welcome to Sandbox Stories.
Thanks, Scott. Really pleasure being here and super honor as well, especially with all the accolades you've achieved and us both being entrepreneurs in the past.
Yeah, it's great to be here. And this is our first Sandbox Stories in a podcast studio. Thanks for helping me set that up.
No problem. I think it would be, I thought it would be lots of fun.
Yeah, I think the audience will find it enjoyable. We're together. We're doing things live today in a studio that's meant for better interaction. So I want to start with what drove you to optometry. You started your career studying optics at Waterloo, but tell me a little bit about who or what influenced you into the profession.
Yeah, for sure. It's a really interesting story. It was actually my sixth grade teacher, Mr. Germano. So he opened my eyes to science and really taught me that almost anything can be explained using science. Most things in life can be explained. And so the things that really fascinated me, that really stuck out, was this one talk he had with us. And going back, this is like sixth grade, so really tiny Steve that's in elementary school. And then I'm learning about, the nucleus, the mitochondria. And he was just explaining like how the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, of the unit of the cells within our bodies. And it was just so fascinating to me. And then he used that analogy of saying, hey, these are like little batteries that can power different components within our bodies. And everything just really clicked from that point forward. And so, I think without that, I don't think I would have ended up in the, science, optometry, engineering pathway that I ended up going into, because honestly, before then, I wasn't really that interested in science.
So you grew up in Toronto.
I did.
What were you doing as you were getting interested in science? Like, were you all academics? Were you doing other things outside of school?
A lot of it was academics, just from my upbringing with my parents. So very prototypical Asian family. A lot of focus on studying and getting good grades, which I think a lot of us do hear about in the media, and then also hearing about folks that talk about their upbringing with traditional Asian families. And so my focus really from my mom and dad was to focus on school, making sure that I did do my studies as soon as I got back home from school, not really focus on, going out and socializing, but more so in terms of academics and making sure that I understood the material that was taught at school.
Why is that a focus in Asian families? You're bringing it up. I don't know that I know that that's true, but tell me why that's true.
I think it all relates, and this is my, my guess from being one of a large multitude of the population in the United States, Canada, the rest of the world. But I think it relates to future opportunities. If you study well, that can usually end up leading you to different careers that open up more doors. And so I think that's usually the inclination on why a lot of the Asian families put so much emphasis on academics, because, you do well academically, you could likely land a career that can provide sustainability for the individual, but also their families too.
So the opposite of that would be if they don't study, then they would be more at the worker level, not as much opportunity.
I wouldn't say that necessarily. I think in a way, a lot of the Asian families do value, academia. And just, learning material, but staying more of that focus of the traditional career path.
Okay.
Rather, in contrast to some other things that you and I have done, which is being on the entrepreneurial journey, which kind of like is almost like a 180 from that traditional dynamic.
So just a little bit more about your parents.
Yeah.
Tell me about the nuclear family you grew up with. What were they like? What did they do?
So father focused on, well, he was kind of like the jack of all trades. Loved my dad. He took care of my family, my mom and my sister. So family of four, and he did whatever it really took to raise the family. Jumping in from jobs as like a bellboy, working in different restaurants, all the way until he landed a job at Chrysler in the tool and die factory. So that ended up being kind of like the mainstay career path that he took, which was a really really great job and career path, and it helped raise our family. But I thank him to this day, because without him, I don't think I would have had as many opportunities. I think many times it's our parents that provide us with those opportunities for the future. And then my mom had a massive full-time role as a stay-at-home mom, but that in and of itself was a lot. Raising me, which I'm sure I was a huge handful, and then my sister as well. My sister, I don't think, was a handful. I think I was more of the troublesome child.
Were you the second born?
I was the firstborn.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So tell me a little bit more about what pushed you to optometry. So we've heard the story about sixth grade,
Yeah.
but what actually was the determinant in going to the Illinois College of Optometry ultimately?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was debating different career paths as I was getting close to entering undergrad. And then during the first and second year of undergrad, really put a lot of focus into, what do I really want to focus on after I do graduate my undergraduate degree? And one of the things that I realized is, I love tinkering with items. So I love to take things apart and put them back together. So I have that, that nerdy persona, and I'm proud to say it as well. I think it's awesome. I think more people should be, or should show some interest and willing to figure out how things really work and how things run. But that was one of the big pieces. And then secondly, really wanted to find a career path that allowed me to help people going forward. I was considering a medical doctor path, but ended up realizing the ideal suit for me would be something where I could still work with gadgets, but help people at the same time. And optometry ended up becoming that career path, because what better profession out there that allows you to do both? Optometrists in general, I think, have the most comprehensive and enjoyable, in my opinion, career path, because they can work with all these advanced devices like the OCTs, for instance, that can analyze the back of your eye, retinoscopes and different devices that can analyze your eye and determine your refractive error. Unlike some other career paths where you're only talking to the individuals and you're still doing a great job, but with optometrists, you're working with the devices, the technologies of the world that are coming out, and then you're also helping people. So it's a great blend of both. And I thought, honestly, there couldn't be a better path for me.
You described yourself a few times as a nerdy gadget
Yes.
guy, and I think optometrists are generally, fit that bill. Had you researched the profession so much that you knew that there was the application of various technologies? Had you gone to an optometrist practice and seen what they were using, and that was part of what endeared you toward the idea of eye care?
I did a number of volunteering and shadowing opportunities with local optometrists in the Mississauga area, and did see some of that you described, but I didn't know as much as I do now in terms of the technologies that are available. So I'd say I only touched the surface, but even at that surface level, it intrigued me to a massive level. And so that was enough to really drive me into the profession.
So you graduated ICO in 2007.
I did.
What was your first clinical experience?
You mean clinical outside of the school after
Clinical
I graduated?
care, right? Yep.
Yeah, so I worked in a number of different private practices around Chicago and had really amazing opportunities and experiences from individuals with a lot of ocular disease that needed surgery in their eyes, to individuals that just needed routine care. It was a lot of fun, and I have actually two experiences that really have stuck in my brain ever since my initial days. It's starting private practice or working with private practice clinics. The first one, I think you may have already heard about it. It's actually, I had a patient, a single mom of 2 kids that was routinely no-showing. So she was our prototypical no-show patient, and I think she actually canceled about 5 or 6 times. And the staff members were so frustrated, saying, "Hey, this individual is probably never going to show up." And you know as well as I do, in running a clinic, you can't have this empty chair time because each block of time that you're not filling up can actually be time for someone else. The care that we can help other individuals. And so if you're blocking off that time and they don't show up, it actually causes a lot of issues in terms of like efficiencies with the practice. And so this one patient was really interesting to me and actually changed my life a lot because she ended up finally showing up. And I still remember it. It was 2009, and I think it was in November. Super rainy day, very cloudy outside. She shows up with her umbrella, quite wet from the outside, sits down on the exam chair and says, "Dr. Lee, why can't we do this at home?" And as simple as the question was, it ended up leading me to come up with all the ideas and concepts related to Opternative, because I went home and I just couldn't stop thinking about the question and started doodling all these different ideas and concepts and realized that there could be a mechanism that connects patients and providers in an online platform. And so that was kind of like the inception back in 2009, but it did take me some time until the company actually got formed later on.
That's really interesting. You said there were 2 patients. We're going to come back to that one. What was the other one?
The second one was less of a feel-good story. So this one actually like hit my heart quite dearly. So it was a gentleman that a lot of us had seen on the outside that we could tell, or that seemed like the individual was a homeless gentleman. He made it into the clinic and was asking for some care, but was turned away. I had actually begged and pleaded to let me actually pay for the individual's care. And so I was saying to the team members, let me take care of this individual. I'll pay for his care. He just needs some eye care. And obviously, he mentioned that he didn't have any insurance and couldn't afford it. And you and I, we've taken this oath in graduating from ICO and just, as optometrist, we've taken the oath to really take care of individuals. And so that was my gut inclination of, hey, listen, I can afford and can help this individual. Let me just take care of him, but wasn't able to get that opportunity. So it really struck home to myself that accessibility and affordability are 2 really big pieces that are missing in healthcare, not just eye care in general, but it didn't leave a good feeling in my gut. And so that's one of the pieces that has really stuck with me ever since.
I mean, optometrists are wonderful human beings.
100%.
Vision USA, Infancy. There's so many wonderful programs where the profession sees the shortcoming, the lack of ability to access, the opportunity, like with infancy, to change the patient's world before the patient has a problem in a public health mindedness. So it makes sense to me that you spend some time thinking about these patient experiences as you started to formulate ideas. Before we get to you actually building a company, what was your technical or engineering background that gave you the thought that you could not just doodle an idea, but you could build it? Were you trained in any way through technology, software engineering? What background did you have there?
Yeah, great question on that. I did my undergrad at Waterloo, and I focused on biology, so a Bachelor of Science in biology, but I also did a year of engineering at Waterloo. And Waterloo, honestly, is one of the top tier schools when it comes to engineers. The first year of engineering gets you a great grasp of all the different concepts. And so you end up taking classes in software engineering. You start learning about all the different dynamics related to physical engineering as well. But that gave me the groundwork and the background related to like understanding that I could have the skills related to, building something bigger. Now I knew I needed some help and some folks that could dig in and understand more of the nuance when it came to like building, software code, but I did understand the high level ability to architect something a little bit bigger.
Okay. So your career has been watermarked by the founder's work you did for building Opternative.
Yes.
And it started roughly in 2012, a few years after you had seen that patient where they asked, why can we do some of this from home?
Right.
So tell us a little bit about where you landed on trying to match the patient and the doctor through technology.
Yeah, many things did happen, and initially, to kind of like fill in the gaps between 2009 all the way to 2012 when I did incorporate the company, it was quite the long journey, and a journey where I was trying to figure out really how to get things started and to kick things off. Because first of all, I didn't have a business degree, didn't have a true business, education from my background. And then secondly, I didn't have the network that a lot of folks do have, that you and I have eventually built up over time through, our meetings and our networking abilities. So back then, this was, Steve Lee, young doctor of optometry without any business connections to investors or folks that could help you build a company. And so one of the things that I ended up doing was I thought, why not just try to meet as many people as I can? And so I went on the internet and I did a search for all the business professors around Chicago. And I think I found a list, I created a list, I think, of around like 15 to 20 individuals. And then I reached out to them and said, hey, can I just buy you lunch? Can I take you out to breakfast? Would love to just pick your brain on this idea I have. And I kid you not, 18 out of 20 said, hey, Steve, this idea is just so far-fetched. We don't think it'll ever succeed. You should just keep doing what you're doing because, you as an optometrist, it's probably something that you could just keep doing. No need to jump into something that has, a lot of challenges going forward.
How were you describing it at that time?
So
What to the audience, what were you trying to tell those professors you thought you were going to build?
yeah, that's a great question. So I described it as an online platform to be able to help doctors analyze patients from afar and then basically work with clinics. So, initially I had never thought about splitting up the doctor and the patient. The doctor and the patient relationship, in my opinion, is the nucleus of the relationship. And I think that's really critical that you can't, split that apart. But I think also making it so that there was software that could help clinics, because I was finding that clinics weren't able to be as efficient as they could. So that was my premise. And those 18 out of 20 or so professors thought that was too tough to really build. A lot of them also quoted and said, Steve, I think they were saying like 9 out of 10 startups end up failing, which is true. I mean, you and I know that through our journeys. It's really, really tough to get things going. But luckily for me, I still remember the one professor from IIT. He recommended I move things forward, and he actually connected me with. And I don't know if you know the book The Lean Startup with Eric Ries. So he ended up linking me to a meetup that had Eric Ries there. So I ended up meeting him, and that kind of kickstarted me getting into the different networks of investors and folks in the startup realm. And that going forward ended up allowing me to eventually meet my co-founder, and then we ended up starting a company together in 2012.
So again, before we go to that, the idea of this patient who had the umbrella and all the wetness on her saying, I want to see if there's a way that you could take care of me because I'm a no-shower. I don't want to come out in the rain. You were trying to give a doctor an opportunity to connect with their patient through technology at a time where we're not even on Facebook. Right. And so you had envisioned it. You got the business idea, and I'm going to build a business. You must have met some technological hurdles early on. I mean, we built Revolution HR as the first cloud software in 2006-07. People are just barely accessing the internet for things to do. What did you envision it looking like? Was it like telehealth platforms of today?
In a way, I think I was probably a little bit ahead of my time. In terms of developing. But that being said, because of my engineering background and learning a lot of the concepts related to engineering and testing, learning, and repeating, I built that into the model as I was trying to get Opternative started. So it was one of the things that I did initially, and I think you and I probably may have done the same thing, is I focused on an MVP, minimum viable product, to test things out to see if things really could be feasible. And so one of the things that I did initially was even just using basic PowerPoint slides, seeing if I could create an optotype, and then changing those slides based on different sizes and resolutions, and then just comparing that to real world data. So was able to really go down to grassroots and figure out, hey, is this even feasible and possible, without even jumping to the large scale that you described of, building something full fledged. I wanted to see, could this really happen? Even though I had that pie in the sky idea, wanted to really prove it to myself as well.
So one of the first examples of actual care delivery through the model was testing visual acuity with optotypes.
That's correct. That's correct.
A contact lens patient, want to find out if they're still, seeing well with the astigmatic lens in one eye. And you're thinking, why not just have them test it, and then they don't have to come in and we save each other time and I make a tighter connection with the patient.
Well, more so in terms of like the R&D efforts initially with the software, of just trying to figure out, hey, can the software actually be created where it actually works? So it's more so that than actually like providing care.
But it was an example. That's an example of how you would provide care.
Correct. Yeah,
testing.
That's right. That's right.
So where did the name Opternative come from?
So there was a lot of back and forth and banter between myself and the early team, because we were trying to figure out, hey, what do we call this? We came up with a lot of fun names. I think even someone called it Eagle Vision initially, and so, some other like fun and quirky names. But at the end, after coming up with a whole list, I think of like 20 or 30 different ideas, the one that kind of stuck was Optical Alternative. Now, that being said, I'm not saying I don't think it was the best choice in general. I think it was a way of really like capturing and making heads turn. So it definitely did that. I don't think it was the best name that could describe what was trying to be done in the future. Because if you look at those two words, you're thinking, hey, this is going to replace, but that was never the case. The case was always going to be, a great way to supplement, to work with all other clinics and providers. And I think it could have been a little bit different in terms of that name, but hey, lesson learned. And I think, sometimes going back, you think, hindsight's 2020, should have been this, that, or something else.
Well, your detractor certainly grabbed
right.
that. And I wonder if you can ask yourself if hindsight has changed your view of it. Did you have a sense that this might be something that would change the relationship between the patient and the doctor? Genuinely, were you thinking about in any way replacing the doctor's work?
So for myself, no. I always looked at it as a way to connect the patient and the provider, and making sure that those two connections stayed really strong. The one thing that kind of makes it difficult when you're building a company is also when you're bringing in more folks. So as the company grows, you go from a person that just might have a great idea. Maybe you have a co-founder and a small team. Maybe there's only a team of 4, but as you grow to like a team of 20, 30, 50, or 100 individuals, there's a lot of voices and a lot of opinions. And especially if you bring in investors and a new board of directors, then there's a whole different dynamic on where the company gets, shifted and moved. So I think that's the one piece that I think is really important to lay out, is that sometimes you have a great idea, you have a mission that you want to push forward, but as the idea and concept gains a lot of traction, sometimes you actually lose control and you're not able to really shift that direction the way you want. And I think there's a lot of like examples of that with some big companies as well, whether in the automotion scene like Uber, Airbnb, and others, where there's been like some shifts in like power and control.
Yeah, so I think you're kind of giving us a little bit of a veiled look into what happened with the company. Let's talk about it specifically.
Right.
So I went through that process too, bringing somebody in who actually knew how to build a business,
right,
who might also connect me to investors. And to your point, when we're building business as an entrepreneur with a great idea, you don't get to always control the way those people behave once they're inside the walled garden.
Right.
So you brought somebody into the company who had another idea, and that idea was more the idea of going more direct to the consumer. Am I planting that responsibility or idea fairly on that person?
No, I think it was a combination of a group discussion and group strategy because I did have a co-founder, and we got along really well, and I think the dynamic was really good because in terms of the skills and the skills that we both brought to the table were very different. My co-founder brought in the skill sets to be very like front facing and then raise money and lead the charge when it comes to pushing things forward for product. And then I brought a lot of that clinical acumen to the table, and then also the connections to different doctors and the ability to really build up a doctor's network as well. So I think we had that good dynamic. But when it came to the point that you just brought up, I think it was a combination of a few things. One was the investor base that we brought in was looking for a few things. So one is sustainability for the company, which I think is first and foremost for a lot of the for-profit companies out there, where you need to make sure that's working.
It's called revenue and profit.
100%, 100%. And so that became a very important goal or KPI, a key performance indicator for the company, and just making sure that there was enough traction to maintain the company. And then secondly, it was also, a mechanism and a strategy to ensure that this company could continue to grow over time, not just in terms of revenue itself, but in terms of like partnerships with other groups.
So tell us a little bit about what was actually put to market. And I'm curious, as an entrepreneur, how was the revenue derived? From whom were you paid? So I'm curious what the model was that actually became Opternative that was operating in the market.
Initially, it was focused on a direct-to-consumer model that allowed individuals to use the platform to renew their prescriptions online. And this was a self-pay model. No insurance was required, but it also made things really simple. So you didn't need to, worry about, checking in with your insurance. The price point was at a level that made a lot of sense for individuals as well.
How would the system be able to help you renew your prescription for eyeglasses or contact lenses? What was the premise of the technology that allowed it to do that for a patient with some sort of unknown refractive error?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it was really focused on the level of visual acuity and a number of different medical questions that really got collected and then passed over to a licensed optometrist or an ophthalmologist. And then it was then up to them if they wanted to renew. So it was never really the system itself, making a choice or a decision, but more so the practitioner making that final decision.
And as the main scientist behind it, were there ever times where you felt a tear, a scruples kind of basis to your participation in the company, knowing that as it became more evident to the optometry world that this was happening and it was getting a bit scrutinized, that you were the doctor behind it? How did that feel?
A little bit tough, I would say, to be honest. But at the same time, there were a lot of fast-moving parts within the company. This was like a fast-growing startup. There was a lot of moving pieces in terms of like product development, but also work with different individuals outside that were working with the organization. So yeah, 100%. It wasn't easy to hear all that, but at the same time, I think I didn't really have that opportunity to describe the mission and the vision that I did have initially.
And it is true that when we're involved in businesses, even businesses we find or are founders of, that sometimes they move with decision makers that are more than just us. I want to read a couple of quotes from a December 2018 article and review of Optometry. Okay. First of all, you were quoted saying, quote, "We're definitely not a replacement for optometrists in any way." And he went on further to say, quote, "The optometrist is the nucleus of all patient interaction." Meanwhile, an AOA volunteer was quoted saying, quote, "Once a company decides it is going to work against the patient's best interest, act in defiance of an FDA cease and desist order, and thumb its nose at a profession trying to protect patients from harm, no amount of rebranding will erase the company culture," which at that time was when the company was going to be called Visibly. I think that says it all about the tempest in the teapot that was going on in that era. And, the company gets into the spotlight. What ended up being your decision about how to proceed from that point? Because you are very clearly somebody who cares about the doctor and patient relationship. The company you had founded was moving in a slightly different direction, or at least its perception was such. Where did you land with all of it?
It really related to seeking guidance from folks that were helping the company, the folks that were leading up the regulatory strategy, the different attorney groups that we were working with. And so, all of that was really out of my realm in terms of knowledge and expertise. So really was leaning on the expertise from the folks that were leading the charge. Now, looking back, we could always say that things could have been done in one way or the other, but it was all about myself and the other leadership just leaning on the guidance from the regulatory folks that were leading the charge, meaning the attorneys.
So you ultimately ended up leaving the company.
I did.
What pushed you to do that, and how hard was it as a founder?
In a way, a little bit. I wouldn't say it was extremely hard, but definitely bittersweet. It's like leaving, a child that you've created from the ground floor. I am, that being said, super proud of the company. I mean, it's still moving strong, super awesome leadership right now that's still taking the company to new levels. And I think that they've done some additional partnerships and some acquisitions, which is fantastic. But at that time, when I did leave the company, I was ready for my next foray. I felt like I learned enough of the skills and wanted to really, test my own chops. And so it was the right time for me to, part ways amicably. And yeah, no regrets at all. Looking back, very happy with how the company progressed. And it's great to have a company where you founded it and it's still going on to this day.
Can you look back and say how it's affected patient care? It being in the market, is it a net negative for doctors? Is it a net positive for doctors? The doctors, I understand it serves patients, but
Right.
Do you have a point of view? Because it was presented as a strong net negative for doctors.
So I think that the doctors that view it as a net negative should just kind of think about the ways that it can help a practice. Let's say I was a brand new grad now in this day and age. So let's say, tomorrow as a brand new grad was looking to open up cold. I would love as much technology as possible to connect with my patients, but also bring in new patients. And I think using technology like you just described is a great avenue to connect with patients. Just think about it this way: the cost to acquire, people in marketing and digital marketing understand this thing called CAC, customer acquisition cost. And so that cost is pretty high when it comes to acquiring a brand new patient into your practice. If you can use a technology that allows you not only to maintain connection so patients don't leave your practice, but also to bring in new patients, I think that's amazing. And so I would say, and just challenge individuals and say like, hey, maybe there's a way to look at things a little bit differently. And that's what I would love. If that can happen where there's even a small percentage that changes over time, I'd love to see that. Because I think it helps everyone. It helps the practitioner, which I think has always been really key, but also the patient itself.
People used to buy practices from other doctors paying for records.
Right.
But what we know today are companies like Pizza Hut or others know that when somebody moves into an apartment, they better find a way to get a coupon for 50% off.
Yes.
Because the lifetime value of that customer in that apartment for the 12 months they live there is substantial if they can get that first buy with some sort of way to turn their head toward Pizza Hut.
Right.
And I think your point that technology can be a way that doctors of optometry can bring patients toward them, turn their heads toward them is wise. We've talked about your entrepreneurial spirit. One of the things you did while you were in optometry school was help students study for national board exams. I think that some of the scrutiny you got later in your business career with Opternative started with some scrutiny you got around doing that work. And it was fairly straightforward work.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the story?
For sure. It was back in third year, so OD3, and studying for boards, and this was super late at night. I think it was like 11 p.m. or even midnight. And I'm always coming up with new ideas. So I think even at that time in place, it kind of showed how I was coming up with new concepts, trying to make things happen. And so I thought, why not put together something that could help other students? Because I was hearing from students where they were having difficulty, accessing study materials, old test questions that only some of them had access to, and then these were circulating around, different schools and different libraries out there. And so basically put together a very bare bones website that, probably took me maybe like an hour or two. And luckily for me, I had some of that background, like we just spoke about in computer programming, and through this bare bones site that allowed folks to buy a PDF that gave some like ways of remembering different parts of the anatomy, the neurological pathways, and then also some recommendations on like how to sleep, eating habits, et cetera, but also some previous study questions as well. And so put that together and kind of like just set it and forgot about it, because at that point in time, I was thinking, hey, let's just see if this even trickles and if there's any traction. It doesn't, we'll see what happens. And I made it such that it was a self-running machine where someone could actually, purchase the study guide, but then would get a PDF emailed straight to them. So I wasn't really tracking this. Over time, there were maybe a few purchases, but this was, remind you, it's like third year optometry school. So really back then, I don't even remember like how old I was, so it really dates me. But nothing really came of it because the traction was so low. And you and I both being entrepreneurs, and both of us being serial entrepreneurs and tried our hand in a number of different ventures, sometimes things hit and sometimes things don't. And sometimes it just has like the slow trickle where there's very little traction. So the traction was minimal. And I had honestly almost like forgotten about this until a little bit of press from Opternative. And then all of a sudden this came back into the limelight, and there was a lot of questions around that. It ended up just being a little bit of a distraction, but my whole thing was just trying to provide accessibility to students. And it really wasn't even, a big endeavor for me.
And again, I think that there's always perspective on both sides. What was told in a lot of optometry press at the time was that there was an effort being made to, use copyrighted material or something. And I'm glad that you're able to tell us that it was, a genuine effort to try to help students.
100%.
Having said that, that's all behind us. And I just think it's an important part of telling your story about how you were always, in my opinion, getting to know you over the years, in an effort to try to help others.
100%.
And I get the scrutiny too, right? Yes. And I'm glad that you did it for the betterment of everybody. Before we go any further in your career, because we're going to get to some more contemporary things, in this whole time of being an OD, coming out of school, being an entrepreneur, you started a family.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your family today.
So we live in Barrington, west suburb of Chicago. Nice little plot of land. There's some ponds, fish, frogs. Married with a little baby boy. He's 3.5 years old. So amazing kid. Probably like the best thing that's happened to me. He's brought so much joy to me, but he's also opened my eyes to many different things that, sometimes I think that we forget, and then I've also forgotten at times, which is the joy and the inspiration of just learning about new things. His mind and his like curiosity about everything from little insects to, worms and snails, or the little frog in the pond is amazing. And he just reminds me of like, not only the innocence of learning from the first time, but also how you can have a great attitude about just trying to figure out things from anew. And so, that's us and our little family. And things are fun. My son definitely keeps me on my toes.
I was listening to a podcast on the way in today, in which John Krasinski talked about a movie that he put out in the spring of 2024 called If. And If stands for Imaginary Friends. And he told the story about how he created the movie during the pandemic when he saw his kids who had that playfulness you describe in your son, sort of asking tough questions.
Right.
And not having that natural curiosity, but instead worry.
Right.
And I do think that it's an important way to think about life through the eyes of a young child, and that everything's new.
Yes.
And it's part of the reason I use Sandbox to discuss what I do, right? That there's a playfulness to this. We can be serious, but we can have fun with it along the way. And it's really cool that your little guy has gotten you to feel that way.
Thank you.
So let's move on in your career. You are a business person now, not really a clinician.
Right.
And you launch an e-commerce platform. It was called Vision Pros. It seems that most people didn't pay attention to it like they did your first venture. And I'd like to understand what you did in learning the need and then building the company.
So just a little clarification. So,
Okay.
so Vision Pros wasn't founded by me, but I was hired as a CEO to lead the company and kind of, adjust the trajectory, change it up, and drive traction, or find an exit for the company. And so I dived in and really appreciated the opportunity, but was basically sought out from the founder of Vision Pros, who was also an optometrist as well.
So why did they build it, and what did it do, or what does it do?
Yeah, so Vision Pros, the whole premise was an e-commerce company selling contact lenses, like a smaller 1-800-Contacts, for instance. But one of the big pieces for Vision Pros was giving back to the community and providing and shifting some of the profits to a nonprofit arm and providing services for missions trips around the world. And also providing resources to eye hospitals around the world as well. So really great mission and give back endeavor. And some of those related to mission trips and also like eye hospitals in India and then also El Salvador as well.
Was this part of the idea of the original founder, who was an OD?
Yes, that's correct.
And so the company ultimately moved through a transaction.
That's right.
And tell us a little bit about how that went.
Yeah, it was a great, it was a very fast learning experience. Took a lot of the learnings that I did learn from my early days at Opternative, working with a number of different investors, because, most of them, while there were many meetings discussing the strategy of the company at the time, also would embed little bits and pieces related to, a final potential exit of the company. Things that you should do, things that you shouldn't do, for instance. And so I really just recounted a lot of those little tidbits of information and knowledge that not only did I just keep them in my brain, but I also took some notes in different notepads, and they really came back to help me. And so during this time, when I was working at Vision Pros, I did a few things. One was internal and external cleanup. So internal, when you have a technology company that is in an e-commerce platform, for instance, sometimes you actually have a number of different tech stacks, or you're using a number of different platforms out there. We had to actually integrate a number of different platforms into one, moving them into a Shopify platform. And that was no small endeavor, especially when you have hundreds of thousands of users / individual customers that are using your platform. So no small feat by any means. And I had to get that done within a month and had to figure out a way to do that with a very small team. Used a combination of some of my knowledge, pulled in some folks that understood AI and ML to kind of speed up the process, and then other folks that really could work really in a very fast, agile way. And then secondly, so that was kind of like the internal cleanup, making sure obviously like the financials were all up to par and everything was well documented. But then the external facing, just making sure that folks were also in good relationships with the company. And luckily for me, as I was doing that, a number of folks actually reached out to me because they heard about what I was doing in my latest foray, working at Vision Pros. And these were actually individuals that had followed my career path. So they're wondering, hey, what's Steve up to? That actually led to the eventual transaction, because it ended up spiraling a number of different discussions amongst folks. And then those discussions ended up getting deeper, where folks ended up showing interest to really go deeper into that transaction.
So does that platform still get used by optometrists today?
Well, that platform ended up getting sold to a public company, and the platform's still active, but it is a direct-to-consumer platform.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So along the way, you did learn a lot about mergers and acquisition.
I did.
Referred to as M&A
Yes.
in the business. That's something that I learned a little bit about when I was an executive in residence for an investment bank, where we represented software companies through sale. You've got the similar background to me there. I'd like to hear what you learned through it, because a lot of us in optometry don't understand, when companies are bought and sold, why and what it's all about. Tell us about what you learned there.
It's really tricky, not only because of the actions that need to be done to get the company to a sale, because most of the time the goal of building is actually not to sell. The ones that are most passionate as a founder, like you and I, it's really not that end goal in general, because folks are usually building for a mission or a vision. Getting to that exit is a nice conclusion, but that's usually not the first and primary goal. Now, over time, when that becomes a decision where you realize, hey, probably passing this on to someone else where there is an exit makes a lot of sense. As an example, where another company can take the company to a whole next level because of their resources or their connections, that then becomes a nuanced dynamic, because one, the tricky piece is you really can't, the amount of disclosure internally is limited. So you're really only chatting with a number of...
Yeah, the team doesn't know that they're about to be sold.
Yeah, and that's probably one of the trickiest pieces, because you don't want to keep information from the team. One of the things that I really believe in is also transparency amongst the team, and trying to keep everything open with everyone that I'm working with. And so in an M&A transaction, it's very, very tough for someone like myself, where you can only tell so much information to the team members. And I think that's probably one of the most difficult parts. Later on, you can explain everything, but it's that period of time between when there's a decision to transact and then when the transaction's finally done, and you never know if that's really going to transact, because anything can happen between those two periods of time, where even the final day before a signature happens, people can change their minds. And so just like buying a house, people can change their minds at the very last minute, and anything can happen. But that's been the trickiest piece for me. The other piece that was very one of the big learnings that I did have in the M&A transaction, through everything that I went through, is just making sure that you understand all the nuance and the detail of the company as much as you can, because sometimes if you're not able to understand all the intricacies, it becomes very challenging to make the transaction actually happen at the end.
Well, sometimes very scrutinizing questions come from those that only know a little bit of the story.
100%.
And if you don't have a good way of answering that question, it can really blow it up, right?
100%.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, in continuing your path toward disruptive, innovative work, more recently, your career path has taken you to join the powerhouse Zenni Optical.
Yes.
What are you doing there?
So right now I'm leading a team focusing on digital innovation.
So what does that mean?
A lot of different things. It's the ideal spot for me, honestly, because with my background, just all the things that I built in the past, but also some of my experiences, I love building from the ground floor. So I love going from, 0 to 1, building something that people really didn't think were possible, and then ideating and then showing that it is possible is what really drives me. And so this is the perfect spot for me. I have a fantastic team, very agile, nimble, and we have great camaraderie in terms of the way we work together. But right now, it's all about testing, validating, and iterating on different ideas, and a lot of focus on just improving, patient experiences, but also optimizing efforts as well. The thing that I love about Zenni is also that, Zenni is housed really close to Silicon Valley, and we have that strong focus on innovation. And that's one of the other reasons that really drove me to Zenni.
So, what do you say to ODs who have been denigrating online optical sales, but they know full well their patients buy glasses there, and in many cases do well? It's a conundrum right now, right? I mean, there's the click and mortar presence of Warby. Zenni's got its activities going on. There's many others, including those owned by companies like Essilor and so forth. So there's a lot of bigs playing in this space.
Right.
And the consumers seem happy. The doctors aren't.
Right.
How do you talk to them?
I would say do what I did, which was secret shop. So one of the things that I did, and that also convinced me to join Zenni, because if you look at the history of Zenni, it's been operational for over 20 years. Over 50 million pairs of glasses have been delivered, which is amazing. Founder is fantastic. Great mission and vision to really make things more affordable for individuals when it comes to eye care materials. But what I did initially, and I don't know if I told you the story. So this was even back, I think maybe like fourth year optometry school. I started buying a number of glasses from the online e-com groups, including Zenni. And, I was testing these out myself because I wanted to see how is the quality of these online players, because I'm sure a lot of times, we read about things online, we read about them in magazines, and they say, hey, quality might not be there. But what I found is the quality was really good. In fact, equivalent or better is what I noticed.
And so there was a somewhat famous American Academy of Optometry
Right.
analysis of a bunch of eyewear bought online that pointed out that a reasonably large, small, but still to them large set of those glasses were made with imperfections they found inappropriate, PDs that would induce some sort of prismatic issue and so forth. Was that an old thing? Is it better today than it was then? Even though you did your analysis way back then, is it better today?
I think so. I can't speak for other folks, but I can say for certain, Zenni's quality and technology is up to par, or even better than actually a lot of the folks that we know, which can be shocking. I've toured the facilities that Zenni has. We also have a large facility in Ohio, state of the art. So we're using like German manufactured lenses, progressive lens designs that are top notch. I think what may have happened in some of the previous studies is analyzing a broad spectrum of sites, and maybe this is just like a guess. I have a guess that some of them probably don't exist today, where these are some folks that just like tried their hand. They made some sales and the quality wasn't there. I can say for certain that Zenni's quality is definitely amazing.
So the theme that anybody's listening to our conversation today has is you are a committed doctor to patient person.
Yes.
But almost everything you've done in the work world has been direct to consumer.
100%. Yeah.
And so help us understand how you reconcile that and how what you're doing is really helping the doctor at the end of the day.
Yeah. For sure. While a lot of it has been direct to consumer, there has been a shift in focus in working with doctors and providers. Zenni actually, just to bring it back a little bit, is we now have an offering to work with doctors and providers in a B2B play. So helping the practitioners that are having difficulty obtaining materials at a affordability cost that makes sense for the practice. And so I think that's fantastic. And I'd love to see more of that across the globe.
Yeah. And I think that's something that a lot of ECPs deal with in their optical component of their business.
Right.
They want to sell $1,000 pair of glasses. And I certainly can understand there are times where the price is justified through the quality of the product and the workmanship and the type of service that's delivered.
Right.
The public, on the other hand, is at a point where there's a lot of pressure on them to find things that they see as equivalent and get it at a price that matches whatever they feel their budget is. And there's this sort of misalignment of the two ends of the tunnel, right?
Right.
And so I think that the optometry space is in for a lot more direct to consumer play.
Great.
And you seem to always be at the center of this.
Yeah.
So the question I have for you is, how does an optometrist listening to this, or some of my friends who aren't optometrists who are consumers, but to the doctors in particular, how can you help them understand why they should open their eyes to this and not look at this as something that's a threat to them? And when I say this, I mean anything that helps the consumer be smarter and more happy with their buy and purchase decision.
Yeah, I think it's mainly focusing on opening eyes to innovation and technology, and not kind of like segmenting that and saying, technology is bad. In particular, tools out there. I think many things happened to society in 2020, for instance, with COVID and the pandemic, for instance, where everyone was starting to use Zoom as an example, and then folks getting thrown into the video conferencing arena. But it almost became forced upon us. I think when it comes to eye care, optometry, and the whole arena around there, I think it's really looking at embracing technology and finding ways to really adapt it rather than pushing it away.
And I don't want to co-opt your words.
Yeah.
I don't want to take your words and make them mine, but I think the embracing of technology that faces the patient is something that's critical.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what you're saying.
I am.
Okay.
100%. Yes.
All right. Because we all have technology in our practices.
Right.
And implementing electronic health records alone didn't really wow the eye care patient.
Right.
And it made many doctors and staff members frustrated and annoyed.
Right.
And I always felt like the deeper mission that I had, I never got a chance to see it through, was a better patient portal.
Right.
Not go to my website and click through a few of these things and re-enter a contact lens prescription from a printout I gave you if you want to order contacts from me through my website.
Right.
There's just more innovation out there that we should be embracing. So that's my takeaway. I want to talk to you a little bit about being fellow entrepreneurs.
Yeah, sure.
For those that have listened this far, I think it's pretty clear that our connection came from us both being entrepreneurs. There are a lot of people I see today that, as I'm semi-retired, that are doing the entrepreneurial thing now. There's a lot of it related to the social media presence. And there'll be people that post memes or quotes about failure is the first step, but most of them haven't failed. Where along the line did you find a real frying pan in your face, like the old Bugs Bunny cartoons? Where did you completely miss the mark?
That I'd say that there was a lot of learnings that I've experienced over the years. The alternative journey for sure, in terms of dealing with the industry and the profession. I think I could have definitely done a better job of collaboration. Working with the schools a little bit deeper, working with the associations. I think that was probably one of the bigger ones, just for me. As an OD, and then working with my colleagues. I think I could have done a better job there.
Yeah, I mean, and those are great examples of actual failure,
Right.
That you sense in your career. And for some of us, we've actually shut businesses down and
Right.
lost other people's money.
Right.
And there's no more humbling experience than that. To this day, I regret, having people trust in me and believe in me.
Right.
And that often overshadows, bringing back money for investors
Right.
on things that I found that did make sense. So I appreciate you saying that sometimes it's the smaller things, not just the epic financial failures.
For sure.
Where are we today with respect to the impact of internet-enabled vision care experiences, right? We've got remote exams. I could list that. Obviously, online sales. Is there something coming down the pipe at us that I don't see that you do?
I think we're still getting there for the ideal, patient-doctor experience flow. I don't think we're there yet. I think, there's a lot of companies that are still working on this. You and I have seen this in the forefront from different groups that have published this on like Vision Monday, for instance, and they've kind of described some of these companies out there that have done that, the remote eye exams using like a slit lamp, for instance, basically like a remote system that allows a doctor to see what's going on and then collecting that data. I think things can get more optimal and more streamlined, because what I'm seeing right now is that there's this dichotomy between what's being offered out there. There's things that are a little more, forward facing, a little more futuristic when it comes to just pure screen dynamics of testing. And then there's the old school dynamic of just using the tools that most ODs already know, but then just adding a camera to allow someone just to watch or just quickly receive the data, which I don't think is necessarily a huge technological push per se. But I think there can be a futuristic blend between the two, where there's a little more innovation going on.
I've got a take I want to share with you.
Sure.
Off the cuff.
Yeah.
One of the things that optometric in-person examinations do that no current remote examination can do is provide the examiner the three-dimensional examination of ocular tissues.
Right.
And so we think about seeing a patient, an asymptomatic patient with corneal guttata, because we do a decent slit lamp exam. So there isn't any way that that's really going to show up and help that patient understand what their future risk toward Fuchs dystrophy might be. An example. Or wide field retinal imaging, not really the same as three-dimensional examinations. And so I wonder if there's a process that has already been thought about at the great esteemed, learning institutions, where the remote examiner, much like a surgeon who's doing surgery next to me on my hip, but doing it through a three-dimensional headset, is going to be able to actually see the patient the way we can see them in the exam room, but we're miles apart. You think that's possible?
So I've actually seen a demo, and that is doable. A group based out of MIT was working on something like that. There's an attachment to a slit lamp, still required someone performing the slit lamp, but then the data would be captured, and then in real time, the doctor could be, around the globe somewhere else, and they're wearing a headset that allows them to see in 3D. Not the most ideal experience, because it's still a little bit clunky, but I think it can eventually get there. But that's definitely feasible.
It does seem, you're right. It does seem like the instrumentation that is looking at the patient is more than an iPhone that delivers a three-dimensional image somewhere. And you're not going to get a parallelepiped slit lamp exam across a cornea with an iPhone. But I think your encouragement to us to think about these future opportunities and the fact that patients want to see us, but they also kind of like their autonomy, is a challenge you've given us all. And it leads me to another topic we've talked about, and that's the impact of artificial intelligence. I like to put air quotes around artificial intelligence. You and I have talked a lot about this.
We have.
I think we see some of it similarly and some different. What is the potential impact of these large language or large data models on the delivery of care? We've seen, what's going on in London with retinal images that can also predict kidney disease or something else. But do you see anything more coming?
Yeah, for sure. And I love our debates. You and I, we chat about AI quite a bit, and we have good back and forth banter related to this. I kind of split it into two different segments. So one segment is AI related to, health and, potential diagnoses. I think with that, there needs to be more work done, making sure that the language models are really curated appropriately, so that there's not, information that's just generated. That's untrue. The second area that I look at that I think is super valuable is non-medical in nature, where AI helps improve really tedious tasks. So one example is, you might have a workforce of, let's say, 100 engineers, and then you're splitting those 100 engineers where maybe 20 are super, super junior and just learn their skills. a lot of the times you can actually make it so that those 20 using AI can achieve the work quality and the level of competency as as the mid level, and then sometimes even the senior engineers, because they're able to get some of that information that they normally couldn't. So it's almost like getting having a mentor by your side 24/7 that never sleeps or eats, and that's just always by you, and you can always ask them questions and have them double check your work. Now, both of us have played around with AI, and sometimes AI doesn't get the answer right the first time, but that's okay because you can continue to ask questions and dig in until you get that final answer. So I think it takes a little nuance to get there, but I see so much value in using AI just for efficiencies and improving the workforce overall.
Yeah, I mean, in AI, they call those misinterpreted answers
Yeah.
hallucinations.
Yes. Yeah.
And you talked about AI models never eating or sleeping, but they are eating. They're consuming data off the web.
That's
As you know, one of my concerns is something that's been raised by others that research it more than me. I've been a student of their writings and learnings. And that is that they're getting information from, in many cases, data that's proprietary on the web. They're representing it to those who use AI, generative systems for particularly text answers. They're grabbing information of other people. So I think we have a lot of ethical factors to deal with. But your point that it can do rote tasks well, improve software testing, for example, which often is done by humans running scripts. There's real potential there. In eye care, I think that the thing that we do the least well, although I know we're really proud of our websites with all kinds of vocabularies and dictionaries on them, is educate patients. If we had done a better job of educating patients the last 50 years, the world would understand why a periodic comprehensive eye exam is an actual medical evaluation, like a colorectal screening examination through, sitting down, doing the night before prep and going in and having, your system examined.
Yeah.
And we have not done a good job at that. And if there is a way that these models can take data, both images and videos and text, and represent it to our patients in a way that helps them, it's a wonderful opportunity for us in our practices. So I encourage people to use it. Will it change the way eye exams are delivered?
I mean, yes, or maybe no, but I think at least it'll help with efficiencies.
And I certainly think some of those efficiencies come from clinical decision making.
Right.
Again, referring to things that I've seen about studies and research going on in London. Heck, even at our esteemed Illinois College of Optometry, there's ongoing work to examine not only blood tests against retina examinations, but other physical examination characteristics against eye examinations. That's where optometric care can really be supercharged. And so I'm excited for that. It's an important thing to note before we're done today that you've given back to your community in a lot of ways.
Yes.
You've served on nonprofit boards. You're currently giving back to Illinois College of Optometry with your time. Why are those things important to you?
I think it's super important to help out with, organizations that are really focused on a mission-driven endeavor, because the skills that folks like you and I, because we're both on nonprofit boards together, is with the skills that we've adapted. I think it's really critical that we're helping organizations get better, basically. I can give you some examples. So I've helped in a few different nonprofit organizations, in addition to working on the board of trustees with you at ICO. But Habitat for Humanity was one of them. Then Good City Chicago was another nonprofit that I was helping out with. With Habitat, I wasn't a board member, but was just helping out the organization in general as a volunteer. Fantastic organization, love the mission and the vision. The one thing that I was noticing through my endeavors of learning how to run for-profit organizations is understanding the financial acumen, how to ensure that things move forward so that the organizations don't get in trouble. And I think sometimes there is that missing link between that in the folks that are running. And so giving back that sort of like guidance and the knowledge, I think is huge. And I love just helping as much as I can, but I think that's where folks like you and I really can help nonprofits.
And that's the beauty of optometrists and their staff members being part of civic organizations is they bring a certain skill set that, has to be cobbled together through a bunch of people in the community.
Yeah.
And so that's wonderful. I'm going to give you the last word.
Okay.
Tell us where Dr. Steve Lee sees the profession in 5 years in terms of how it's doing the care it's doing, interfacing with patients, or how the patients are interfacing with us.
So I see a lot of changes relating to efficiency of care. We've seen a lot of consolidation and changes within the industry, especially some of the group practices that have been acquired from larger organizations. I think what's going to happen over time, because of technology, because of the different forefronts of folks utilizing software, for instance, I think there's going to be greater efficiency models where patients and then patients/consumers will have more opportunity and more options out there, which will drive practitioners to perform better for the patients, which I think is great. So I like that model, because without that sort of model out there, folks are not as incentivized to really move to better the practice dynamics, if that makes sense, because it kind of makes us all better. It makes you and I better people. If we do have a practice, it makes us want to do more for the individual. And I think it's only better for society in general, not just optometry in general, but overall.
I mean, there's all kinds of examples where disruptive technologies have forced people providing a certain type of service or product to deliver it in a new way.
Yeah.
And you can either complain or you can find a way to match the consumer where their mind is. And I think what you're saying is we need to start really thinking about where a consumer's mind is. An eye care consumer is going to be different in the future.
100%.
Yeah. Dr. Steve Lee, thank you for sharing your amazing stories with me today.
No problem. It was great to be here. Thank you.
Thanks. And to the audience, thank you for attending. Until my next Sandbox story, be great at all you do.